Hello everybody, this is ShadowSlayerX, and welcome to the interlude between Night of the Zealot and the Dunwich Legacy for Mr. Roland Banks. Now if you're joining this episode, I would highly suggest go watching the last 3 episodes, because this is the continuation of Roland from one campaign to the next. So I've created a little interlude here. This is just some way for me to tie Roland to a new investigator so we can two-hand the Dunwich Legacy. So Roland Banks currently has 25 experience in his deck, 0 remaining left to spend. So once we defeated Irmadoth, spoiler, we got quite a bit of experience. And I guess it's more used as kind of like a scoring card for those who defeat and survive, get this experience, and you can say how much you ended with. But how often do you actually get to go ahead and use that? So we went ahead and we purchased 2 crazy things, one really good and one I've never used before. You'll see. So I'm pretty excited. We have 3 weaknesses in the deck. We have Cover Up the Tower, which over the last 3 episodes you saw was quite annoying, and Psychosis was added to our deck. Roland has 3 mental trauma and 2 physical trauma, so that's going to be really tough, especially with his weakness of cover-up. The mental trauma, he only has 5, so there's a high chance he'll be driven insane. So there might be also a high chance of another interlude to introduce another character. If we think Carolyn will need it, and I kind of think she will. So, and speaking of Carolyn, if anyone doesn't know what she's all about, she is very good at healing horror, which is perfect for what Roland's going to need. So why don't I go ahead and start reading this, and you guys can hopefully not judge me too harshly, as every artist, they're pretty hard on themselves, and I'm not sure if I'm the best writer, but I had fun with this. So this is a summary of what happened in the last 3 episodes, and leading us into the beginning of the next one. So I hope you guys enjoy. Roland didn't know where he was. The last thing he remembered was a vision of the massive monster. His eyes shot wide open and he bolted to sit upright. Except there was unexpected resistance. Roland was in a bed, and his arms were held securely with thick leather straps. 2 women stood at the end of his cot in a heated conversation. The one woman, dressed like a nurse, made an audible gasp when he reached the restraint's limits, while the red-haired woman didn't flinch. "Lita, get me out of here," Roland said with faltering confidence. His vision was a bit blurry, and he blinked a few times since he couldn't reach his own face. The woman stepped closer, her features becoming clearer. This wasn't Lita. "Who are you?" The woman adjusted her glasses and took a seat next to him. "Agent Banks," she began. She reached into her worn-looking rucksack and pulled out a large clipboard and notepad. "My name is Carolyn Fern, and this has been the most lucid you have been since you were brought to St. Mary's Hospital here in Arkham just over a week ago. I may be an on-call psychologist, but your bosses have made it perfectly clear that they require a report from me about your mental status post-haste." The woman paused and took a small breath. The nurse chimed that if Carolyn needed anything, that she would be down the hall. Carolyn nodded and turned back to Roland. She appeared to drop the professionalism a bit now that they were alone. "If you would be so kind, let's begin." Roland relinquished his strength to the cot and the straps. He took a long, deep breath and exhaled. Where to begin? I had been given directions to the city of Arkham with the directive of discovering the multiple sources of unnatural activity leading to dozens of deaths that were not being properly reported. I had a note with 3 names on it: Skids O'Toole, Rex Murphy, and William Yorick. I had no further data on whether these were informants or something else, so everyone was a suspect. I quickly learned of the locations of all 3 men, and how their current professions could lead to promising information. I didn't learn much from Murphy. He tried to push me away, saying he needed to interview someone for a story but the reporter tripped and nearly broke his camera. If I hadn't been there to catch it, he would have had more to worry about than just loose ends. What I did learn was that there were shady folks meeting up in the woods next week, and that he had hunches as to who they were, but no concrete proof, and was tight-lipped. Yorick was the nicest gentleman I had met in all of Arkham. He was grizzled from his job as a gravekeeper, but he was honest and told me the truth. It sounded crazy at first, but I now know it was all true. Ghouls, monsters, and folks in robes had been coming to his graveyard for fresh corpses. It was the first time someone had mentioned a cult or anything heinous in Arkham to me yet. I eventually found Mr. O'Toole, but we ended up in a back alley with guns drawn. He didn't want anything to do with me. He somehow knew I was a Fed, and I hadn't said a word while we were in the pub. I threw him my card and told him to contact me if he wanted to tell me about the cults and monsters in Arkham. He looked like he had something to say, but took the card and ran off. Even though I didn't half believe any of the information I had gathered, days were passing by. What Murphy had said to me was itching at me. The date of the occultist's meeting was to be the next day. It would be worth investigating with no real leads of my own. I guess this is a good time to tell you why I burned my house down. I was going to ask about how that occurred, Carolyn said, as she scribbled something down. They said a red-haired woman brought you in. Was that the Lita you mistook me for when you woke up? Lita Chandler. I don't know when or how that woman had broken into my home. At the risk of you writing down that I am unfit for duty, I will tell you that the night before the cultist meeting, someone tried to trap me in my room. For all I know, it could have been her before she knew who I was. And I don't mean that I was barricaded in. They made it so the only way out of my room physically disappeared. I don't know if maybe I'm crazy or was drugged, but I grabbed what I could from the room and eventually found a way out. There was a hidden door under the carpet that led directly down into the hallway. I could hear a woman chanting something from within my own house. There were these monstrous-looking deranged dogs trying to get at her. She called them ghouls, something Yorick had mentioned earlier in the week. Luckily I had pulled a decorative sword off the wall and was able to kill them. Turns out the sword wasn't decorative. The frightening part of this story is when the man-sized monster dog showed up from growing fog that came from nowhere. It was wearing a skull mask and red robes, holding some sort of scepter or staff. Luckily it couldn't stand up to my Thompson. Well, or so I thought. You unloaded a Tommy gun into it and it didn't die? Carolyn leaned a little closer in her seat as if it would help her absorb the story better. I'll get there, miss. The foundation of my makeshift home had started to crumble, and there were small caverns full of small tunnels with more of those devil dogs racing towards us. Lita gave me the option whether to bury these tunnels and the ghouls with a burning house or to abandon ship, but there wasn't much of a choice. Unfortunately, someone had noticed Lita breaking into my home and called the police. As we set the place ablaze, we ran into Officer Tensey, who was blocking the exit, and we bowled past him. The last thing we saw when we looked back at the house was a figure bathed in fire step through the threshold and pick up the poor officer by his neck. In Officer Tensey's last moments, he unloaded his pistol directly into the skull of that creature as it crushed his windpipe. Carolyn only betrayed her emotions through her eyebrows now, and the vast number of notes she was taking at blinding speeds. She was truly gathering as much information as possible, and she was good at it. This Carolyn Fern would probably make for a good partner. So what happened next, she said. Officer Tensey's partner had been instructed to stay in the car, but witnessed the creature killing his partner, their bodies slumping and succumbing to the flames. The young officer's name was Lenny Crawford, and he had chosen to help us. Whether he did it because he believed our story or because it proved an outlet for the anger coursing through him, Lenny was ready to beat some information out of some cultists. Lita explained to us about the cult and their plans. She had a list of names, something Rex Murphy didn't have. We located, interrogated, and arrested some legitimate cultists. But there was one that no longer seemed human and tried to eat us. Carolyn didn't react. Maybe she had been around cannibals before. We had to kill the cannibalistic one and a few other cultists who were willing to die to silence us. We learned that the ritual had begun and that all he could see was the monster. It was like it had left a scar on the memory, and he was back in the woods. Roland twitched and stuttered and eventually shook it off. Carolyn had outstretched her arm just slightly and pulled it back. I'm okay, just bad memories. Roland stretched his neck back and forth. We learned that a monstrosity was being brought into our world, and we were too late to stop it. The three of us made for the woods in Lenny's car. We fought more of those ghoul dogs, but we were too late to interrupt the ritual, and heard a sound like nothing God ever meant for us to hear. Something beyond comprehension. The door to the little room slammed open. Carolyn nearly jumped out of her seat. Roland shook himself out of his stutter and looked up to see Lita Chandler. She didn't seem impressed. I've already gathered your... Lita eyed Carolyn, lingered, moved back to Roland. Belongings in this duffel bag here. Excuse me, but I have to... Carolyn started. Lita didn't pay her any kind and walked over to Roland's cot and began undoing his straps. This man saved my life, and was almost driven mad after he loosed a hail of bullets, blessed bullets, into the being that walked through that tear in reality. The cult of Irmadoth. Roland flinched at nothing when he heard that name, as he rubbed his sore wrists. Didn't have a clue as to what they were summoning, but that monstrosity didn't even die if it can die. We just sent it back through the tear as it winked out of reality. Carolyn stood up, gathered her... Man, I screwed up some of this writing. Carolyn stood up, gathered her composure quickly, and placed her clipboard into her bag. I never had the intention of keeping Agent Banks here. I've gathered enough information to make an informed decision. Lita raised an eyebrow, shifted her weight, and faced Carolyn with an unblinking stare. And what decision have you come up with, then? Lita asked, a hand dipping into Roland's duffel bag. Carolyn searched through her bag quickly and pulled out a letter. I have a colleague who has dealt with monstrosities like the one Agent Banks had been raving about in his less lucid state. My contact believes that there has been some organized group working against him and his colleagues who defeated a monster back in Dunwich. Lita's grip on something in the bag loosened and a small clang of metal on metal could be heard. You may call them cultists or thugs, but I needed help, and when I was called out by a third-party group to assess the one man to apparently successfully fight against these forces, how could I not ask for his aid in one way or another? Roland stretched and groaned, his body stiff. Lita threw him a bag with his clothes. Get dressed, handsome. I feel like the three of us have more talking to do. That's it. So, screwed up on the reading a little bit there. Well, screwed up on the writing a little bit there, but that's fine. That's fine. I hope you guys enjoyed that. This is going to be... Let's see if I can get some decks up here. These aren't going to be the final... Well, Roland's deck will be final. Let's bring this over here. So, I don't think I'll be changing Roland. It's a bit bigger. What I've added for Roland here is I added the Key of Ys, and I'm not going by the taboo rules. I'm thinking if I do a continuing campaign through campaign, I will start using the taboo rules as they appeared. I think that's fair. And the Key of Ys, he's going to need it. He's going to need some sanity soak. It might make him too OP. Who knows? There's some things that just deal straight up horror. So, for those who don't know what the Key of Ys is, it is a unique asset accessory. It is a neutral card. Costs 3 resources, and it's 5 experience, and I can hold up to 4 sanity. You get +1 to each of your skills for each horror on the Key of Ys. When any amount of horror would be placed on you, place 1 of that horror on Key of Ys. So, for instance, if I have to take 1 horror, that goes onto the Key of Ys. If I have to take 2 horror, I can put 1 of that on Key of Ys and 1 on me. So it kind of is perfect because at max, this can give me +3 to all my skills, which should shore up some of my weaknesses. The only time I could ever see, if there was a agility, treachery, that if I failed I took horror, that is probably how this will be destroyed. So force, when the Key of Ys leaves play, discard the top 10 cards of your deck. And for those who don't know, when your deck is completely empty, you can reshuffle it and flip it back over, but you have to take 1 horror, which is one thing that Roland won't really be able to do. Luckily, he still does have the Hallowed Mirror, so he will be able to add those soothing melodies to his deck in hand to help heal a little bit. The other thing we've added is, I've never used this card Agency Backup, and I think it's pretty cool. It is extremely expensive. You will cry if this is taken away by a Crypt Chill or something like that. But it's pretty great. So it's a 5 experience card, costs 7 resources to play. It has 4 health and 4 sanity, so it can soak up even more sanity. Agency Backup may be assigned damage or horror dealt to other investigators at your location, which might help Carolyn, maybe. As a free trigger, exhaust the Agency Backup and deal 1 damage to it to deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. That's not too bad. So this does replace Beat Cop. So that is I think that's almost 1-for-1 for the upgraded Beat Cop, I believe. But it has a second free trigger. Exhaust Agency Backup, deal 1 horror to it, discover 1 clue at your location. So if we don't have Key of Ys up, and we don't have any other stuff buffing our intellect, and maybe even Carolyn's in a different location, or this just might be that one thing you need. Like, even if Carolyn has to think about how she's gonna commit things, say it's a Shroud of 4 or 5, and she doesn't really have much to commit, and the scenario might bank on getting that 1 clue, and Roland and the crew show up, and we'll just call it John Wick. Maybe. No. But I'm excited to use it. I've never used it. I don't know how the heck we're going to get into play. Hopefully maybe our 45 Thompsons will shore us up with some ammo. So for instance, if we get a 45 out, toss on some custom ammunition and extra ammunition, that would be an additional 5 resources I could get off the Thompson. So that's something. Things I'm thinking about upgrading, I'm not too sure. I mean, I might get a Bandolier level 2 so that we can carry our Thompson and some other fun stuff. I might upgrade the Enchanted Blade, maybe, because I think the Enchanted Blade basically becomes a machete until you lose your charges, but at least it'll always be a +2. We might even just put in machete, I'm not sure. Pathfinder is good, I don't know if we'll need another one. I think something worth fighting for might be something we can take out now, because we did add 2 cards that can each soak up 4 sanity. They do cost much more. Well, I guess this one costs the same. But, yeah. Depending on how this goes, we might even want another charisma. There's a lot of allies in this campaign, and we might want to change out some of these over here as well. We might want Vicious Blow too. I mean, that's not bad. I would also I might even change out or try to get what is that card? Stick to the Plan. That would be really cool. And there's a few new cards that I'd like to play around with as well. Next up, Carolyn Fern. Now this deck is not final. So Carolyn Fern here, I've mixed her up with a bunch of different things. So she has some of the similar things you've seen from Roland here, like Inquiring Mind. Roland used to have the folding camera. We can even flavor it that he gave it to her. She also has a magnifying glass. I did add one Delve Too Deep. I'm being a little cocky here. Or maybe I'm even just shoring up Carolyn surviving a little bit longer. So, who knows? So, if those who don't know, Delve Too Deep. In player order, each investigator draws one card from the top of the encounter deck, then add Delve Too Deep to the victory display. Not too bad. That's one extra experience, even on a bad game, right? So, she has a couple treachery cancellations, which Roland might be very happy for. She has the very new card, Read the Signs. You can add your willpower to your investigate skill. So for her, she'd be investigating at a 7. And you may ignore the effect or keyword on your location which would trigger during this investigation. So some would say investigate, or when you investigate this location, you have to take a horror or discard 3 cards from your hand, things like that. This would trump that. And you get an additional clue at the location. So it's really cool. That came out in the, not the latest, but the second, because one just came out, 1,000 Shapes of Horror, but the one before it was Search for Kadath. What I'm also interested in playing here is Teamwork. Investigators at your location may give or trade any number of item assets, ally assets, or resources among one another. I don't know how this is going to work, but I think it's kind of great. Like, if we give Peter Sylvester to Roland, and like, I don't know, maybe we'll take like Lita as a trade back. Like, I don't know, how does this work? Any number, yeah, you can trade any number of item assets, ally assets, or resources. So like, I don't know. And it's a tactic. I'd like to see, actually, real quick. What's Stick to the Plan? She might not even be able to take... No, yes, she is. Where's Stick to the Plan? I think it's an asset, right? Here we go. Stick to the Plan. Yes, so before you draw your opening hand, search your deck for up to 3 different tactic or supply events and attach them. That'd be pretty cool. So you'd start with Teamwork. So we could, like, deck out Roland, or even in reverse, deck out Carolyn, you know. That'd be 10 resources to play with for... You might, like, for instance, sometimes one needs 6 and one needs, you know, you never know. Is Teamwork fast? It's not fast. But it does cost 0. So that's interesting. I am going to play around with the deck some more. I gave Carolyn 2 spells for her 2 slots. One that can deal some damage, and if you hit one of the special symbols, it reduces the enemy's fight and evade. So sometimes it might be good for Carolyn to go up and just even try to wither something, and then have Roland just step in and demolish the creature. I don't think Carolyn can take the upgraded wither. No. But it's not a bad option. She only has a 2 fight, so... And she can't take weapons beyond level 0. I'm pretty sure. No weapon cards level 1 through 5. That's right. So, yeah. We're going to rely on Roland here. She does have a Dynamite Blast. That's fun. And I think that's it. Oh, we did add both of her her extra weakness and her extra signature asset. So Foolishness is a Cat of Ulthuar, ally creature in Dreamlands. It costs 4 to put into play. It has 2 wild icons. It has 1 health and 4 sanity. Foolishness enters play with 3 horror on him. Horror on him may be healed as if it were on Carolyn Fern. While Foolishness has no horror on him, you get +1 to all skills. So that's not bad. With Foolishness healed, she would be a 4/5/3/3, which is insanely great stats. But she doesn't have... She doesn't have, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? She does not have charisma yet, so we'll see. She does have Solemn Vow, so we can give one of those to Roland, and once Roland has it, and we're on the same location, he can exhaust it to move 1 damage or horror from a card he controls to a card that Carolyn controls, which is pretty awesome because that includes assets too. So, yeah, it's pretty neat. I don't know. I've never done this, so I've only ever played true solo or with other people. I've never done two-handed. I really hope I can stay focused. What if we gave Foolishness to Roland? And then we healed that. Roland would be, like, what? 4, 4, 5, 3? Is that right? No. I don't know. What is Roland? Yeah, 4, 4, 5, 3. Yeah, that was pretty good. And then on top of the Key of Yeast? Oh, Lord. That'd be interesting. I don't know. I've never used Teamwork either, so I'm very excited. Is there anything I haven't mentioned on her? She has no stone unturned. It's pretty good. I think the thing I was worried about is her not having enough heal cards. I think that was what I was worried about. So maybe I'd like to hear in the comments about how to make Carolyn better. I think for better or for worse, we're going to leave Roland as is. Even if these were terrible decisions, we're going to leave it as is. But she's up for changes. We really hope he can make it all the way to the end of Dunwich, but I don't see him passing that at all. Like going further than that. So hopefully he can make it that far. Yeah, I'm really excited to get this started. I'd love to hear some feedback from everybody. Oh, I forgot to mention, Carolyn also has the Doomed weakness. So if anyone doesn't know what the Doomed weakness is, this came from the Forgotten Age. And when you draw it, you take a horror, and in your log you you write that Doom approaches. And then the second time you draw it, you place a Cursed Fate, or you search your collection for a Cursed Fate, and you place it in the bottom of your deck, which can also be really scary if you're like close to being at the bottom of your deck. We might want to put cards in her. Can she take level Secret? She might be able to take what's that one Mystic card? The one that shuffles your deck back. I forget what it's called. I think it's an event. Quantum Flux? Yes, shuffle your discard pile to your deck and draw 1 card. Remove Quantum Flux. So we might want something like that in the future. We'll see. We'll see how the first few go. Because if we draw this each time, like clearly we're gonna need some help. But the problem with shuffling is it goes from the bottom to anywhere in the deck. So we might even want to put more of those search cards as well. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm excited. For better or for worse, and we'll go all the way to the end of Dunwich, even if we have to roll up 2 new investigators. And I will do little interludes for each one. I'll try to improve on the rating. And yeah. So I hope that you guys liked that. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I really would like to hear feedback about anything you saw in this video, anything in the last 3 videos. And I'll try to start getting some cool thumbnails and stuff. Maybe I'll even try to do it for the old ones as well, once I figure something out. But as always, I have been ShadowSlayerX. You can call me Shadow. I'd like to also shout out a couple channels I frequent. I watch Out of Ammo, Out of Time. I watch Big Stupid Grin, Arkham Chronicle. I listen to Drawn to the Flame. I haven't got on board yet with Mythos Busters, but there's a lot of great places that have way more content than I do for Arkham Horror. So I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm forgetting a few. The Whisper in Darkness. Did I mention that one? Love him. Cat Weasel. He's the one who actually introduced me to a few Arkham games, so go check out all those channels, and I love you guys. Peace.